The classroom smelled like recycled air and nervous sweat. Typical Tuesday on Station Helix-9, third rotation. Just another standard education cycle in the most boring sector of the Galactic Coalition. I adjusted my thermal pouch and tried not to fall asleep, while Professor Krill droned on about interspecies trade regulations. My name is Vex, by the way. Yeah, just Vex. Single-syllable names are all the rage on my homeworld. I am a Kalrathi, which basically means I look like someone crossed a salamander with a philosopher and gave it anxiety. 4 eyes, 2 hearts, 0 interest in whatever regulatory framework governed mineral exports from the outer rings. But I digress. The human girl sat 3 rows ahead of me, perfectly still, unnaturally calm. Her name was Riley Grant, and she had transferred to our station 6 cycles ago from some backwater planet nobody had heard of. Earth, they called it. Classification, Deathworld. Gravity index, absurd. Atmospheric composition, barely, breathable for civilized species. Native predators, everything apparently, including the plants. Riley looked harmless enough. Short by human standards, maybe. Brown hair pulled back in what humans called a ponytail. Wore the standard station uniform like everyone else. Kept to herself mostly. Never caused problems. The perfect student, really, if you ignored the occasional moments when her eyes went distant and cold, like she was calculating exactly how many ways she could dismantle you before lunch. I know what you are thinking. Vex, you are being dramatic. Humans are just another species trying to integrate into galactic society. Stop profiling, yeah. Sure. Tell that to the combat instructors who refused to spar with her after orientation week. Tell that to the medical staff who had to recalibrate their equipment because human bone density made no evolutionary sense. Tell that to the cafeteria workers who watched her casually lift supply crates that required 3 Kalrathi and a mechanical assist. But I am getting ahead of myself. Professor Krill was explaining something about tariff structures, his voice modulating through 17 different harmonic frequencies, because his species communicated primarily through elaborate throat singing. Half the class had their translation implants struggling to keep up. The other half had given up entirely and were probably playing neural games behind their optical shields. Riley sat there, hands folded on her desk, posture straight, breathing so slow and controlled it looked like she might be in some kind of meditative trance. Humans did that sometimes, apparently. Their predator brains required them to artificially calm themselves down, or they would just vibrate with barely contained violence at all times. That is not an exaggeration, by the way. I looked it up. Human baseline adrenaline levels would be considered a medical emergency in most species. They just walked around like that. Every day. Acting normal, terrifying. The student next to me, a Fixian named Torp, with 6 manipulator arms and an overbite, leaned over and whispered, "Did you finish the assignment on resource allocation theory?" "Does it look like I finished?" I whispered back. "Does it look like anyone in this room cares about resource allocation theory?" Fair point. Professor Krill continued his lecture, completely oblivious to the collective disinterest radiating from his audience. Outside the observation windows, the station rotated slowly, stars wheeling past in their eternal dance. Somewhere out there, important things were probably happening. Wars, discoveries, actual excitement. But not here. Never here. Helix-9 was a border education station, technically under coalition protection, but far enough from anything interesting that we might as well have been floating in a closet. Safe. Boring. The kind of place parents sent their offspring when they wanted them to get a proper education without any of that pesky danger or adventure. Riley shifted slightly in her seat. Just a tiny movement, barely noticeable, but her head tilted, almost imperceptibly, like she was listening to something the rest of us could not hear. Then the alarm went off. Not the normal alarm, not the late for class chime or the fire drill pulse. This was the sound that everyone hoped they would never actually hear outside of safety simulations. The deep, bone-vibrating, three-tone sequence that meant exactly one thing. Station breach. Hostile contact. This is not a drill. The classroom erupted into panic. Students scrambled, knocking over chairs, grabbing personal items, making for the exits like someone had just announced free oxygen in the hallway. Professor Krill's throat singing hit a pitch that my translator gave up on entirely, just displaying error symbols across my visual field. I froze. Not out of courage or anything admirable, just pure, distilled terror turning my muscles into decorative statuary. But Riley stood up slowly, deliberately, with the kind of controlled precision that made my survival instincts start screaming. Her face, which had been pleasantly neutral moments before, shifted into something else entirely. Something focused. Something that suddenly made every story about Deathworld predators seem completely, horrifyingly reasonable. "Everyone get down," she said quietly. Nobody listened. Of course nobody listened. We were panicking. The classroom door exploded inward. Not opened. Exploded. As in, formerly a door, now an expanding cloud of metallic fragments and superheated vapor spreading across the room in a very hostile manner. Through the smoke stepped 3 figures. Skrell raiders, from the look of them. Mercenaries, pirates, generally unpleasant individuals who made their living attacking soft targets like, education stations full of unarmed students. They wore combat exoskeletons, carried plasma weapons, and had the kind of facial scars that suggested they enjoyed their work a little too much. The lead raider, a massive specimen with cybernetic jaw implants and approximately 0 empathy in his eyes, swept his weapon across the room. "Nobody move. You are all very valuable hostages. Your families will pay extremely well for your safe return. Probably. Assuming we feel like returning you." His companions laughed. The kind of laugh that suggested they had practiced being evil in front of mirrors. Most of the students dropped to the floor immediately, hands over their heads, following every hostage protocol we had been taught since first cycle. The smart move, the survival move, the move that every rational being would make when confronted with armed hostages takers. Riley did not drop to the floor. Riley stood there, perfectly still, perfectly balanced, and smiled. Not a friendly smile, not an everything will be okay smile. The kind of smile that apex predators probably wore right before they reminded their prey exactly why running was, always a good idea. "You should leave," she said calmly. The lead raider blinked. All 3 of his eyes, actually, cycling through what I recognized as Skrell confusion patterns. "Excuse me? You should leave this station immediately. Maybe try a different sector. Different career entirely, honestly. I hear agricultural work is very fulfilling." Riley tilted her head slightly. Last chance. The raider's confusion shifted into anger. He took a step forward, raising his plasma rifle. "You have got to be kidding me. Do you know what this weapon can do to unarmored flesh? Do you have any concept of the biological damage I can inflict with a single trigger pull?" Riley looked at the weapon, then at the raider, then back at the weapon. "Yeah, I do actually. But the question you should be asking yourself is, Do you know what I can do? You are unarmed, the raider said slowly, like explaining basic concepts to a particularly dim child. Am I, though? Riley asked. Then her hand shot out, faster than my 4 eyes could track, and grabbed the edge of her desk. Remember when I mentioned human bone density? Remember when I said the combat instructors refused to spar with her? Riley ripped the desk out of the floor, the entire desk, bolted down, rated for structural stability in zero-gravity environments, made of composite materials designed to withstand accidental plasma discharge and the occasional student tantrum. She just tore it free like someone pulling up a particularly stubborn weed, metal shrieking, bolts shearing off, and then she swung it. The desk hit the lead raider like a comet hitting an unfortunate planet. He went flying backward, armor and all, crashing into his companions, all 3 of them tangling together in a heap of cursing and failing combat exoskeletons. Riley did not stop. She was already moving, desk still in hand, using it like the galaxy's most improvised and terrifying weapon. She brought it down on the second raider, once, twice. The exoskeleton sparked and hissed and stopped working. She spun, swinging horizontally, catching the third raider across his center mass and sending him crashing through the classroom wall into the hallway beyond. The lead raider tried to bring his weapon up. Riley stepped on it. Her boot came down on the plasma rifle like a hydraulic press, and the weapon crumpled, safety systems screaming, energy cell venting harmlessly into the floor. I warned you, Riley said quietly. Then she grabbed the raider by his armored collar and lifted him off the ground. Just lifted him, like he was a particularly unruly kitten. Now, you are going to tell me how many more of your friends are on this station. You are going to tell me what you want, and then you are going to very seriously reconsider your life choices. Clear? The raider nodded, all 3 eyes wide, mouth hanging open, making a sound somewhere between a whimper and a prayer. Riley set him down gently, almost carefully, then turned to look at the rest of us still frozen on the floor. Sorry about the desk, she said, dropping it with a crash. I will file a damage report later. Then she walked out of the classroom, following the sounds of combat echoing through the station corridors, leaving us all staring at the destruction in silent, absolute, and very justified terror. I looked at Torp. Torp looked at me. Did that actually just happen? He whispered. Yep. Deathworlders are scary. Yep. Somewhere in the distance, plasma fire lit up the corridor, followed by screaming. Not human screaming, raider screaming. The kind that suggested they were rapidly learning why attacking a station with even one human on board was a spectacularly bad tactical decision. Professor Krill slowly emerged from under his lecture podium, thermal sensors blinking in shock. Class dismissed, I think. Best executive decision he ever made. The station alert system kept blaring, but honestly, after watching Riley Grant demolish 3 armed raiders with classroom furniture, the alarm seemed kind of redundant, like warning people about a thunderstorm after lightning already hit their house. Twice. I should have run to the evacuation pods like every rational being with functional survival instincts. Instead, I found myself creeping down the corridor, following the sounds of chaos, because apparently my sense of self-preservation had taken an extended vacation and left stupidity in charge. Torp followed me, naturally. Misery loves company, and imminent death loves witnesses. This is insane, he hissed, his 6 arms clutching the walls as we moved. We should be heading to Safety Zone Alpha. We should be following protocols. We should be literally anywhere except here. Probably, I agreed, peering around the corner. But are you not even a little curious? Curious about what? How we die. I can imagine that perfectly fine without field research. Fair point. But momentum carried us forward anyway, creeping through corridors that smelled like ozone and burnt metal. The station's interior lights flickered, emergency systems struggling to compensate for whatever damage the raiders had caused during their very brief and very unsuccessful invasion. We found her in the central junction hub, standing in the middle of what could only be described as a disaster zone. 7 more raiders, all in various states of questioning their life decisions. One was unconscious, folded over a bench in a way that suggested his exoskeleton had become more prison than protection. 2 others sat against the wall, hands raised, weapons discarded, looking like they desperately wanted to call their mothers. Riley stood in the center, barely winded, talking into a commandeered communication device. Yes, station security. I have detained 11 hostiles in sectors 4 through 7. You might want to bring medical supplies, and possibly trauma counselors. For them, not me. Lieutenant Cross, head of station security, and a Thoraxian who looked like evolution, designed him specifically for looking intimidating, responded through the comm with barely contained panic. Miss Grant, please remain where you are. We are mobilizing tactical response teams. Do not, I repeat, do not engage any additional hostiles. Riley glanced at the defeated raiders scattered around her like broken toys. Little late for that, Lieutenant, but I will try to contain my enthusiasm. She noticed us then, me and Torp trying very hard to blend into the corridor architecture. Her expression shifted slightly, amusement flickering across her features. You two should not be here. We know, I managed to squeak out. But we were concerned about you. Obviously you are fine, very fine, exceptionally capable, really. I appreciate the concern. Riley set down the comm device and walked over to us, stepping carefully around unconscious raiders like they were merely inconvenient furniture. But seriously, evacuation pods. Now. There might be more of them. More? Torp's thermal signature went pale. How many boarded the station? According to this one, Riley nudged a raider with her boot, and he flinched like she had hit him with a meteor. They came in with 3 assault teams, 30 raiders total. Pretty standard hit and grab operation. Board through docking ports, secure valuable hostages, demand ransom, leave before coalition forces arrive. 30, I repeated, and you have handled 11. 13, actually. 2 more tried to ambush me near the commissary. They are currently taking an involuntary nap in the cold storage unit. Seemed thematically appropriate. She paused, listening to something. Make that 14. Someone just triggered the proximity alert I set up near engineering. Before either of us could ask what proximity alert, Riley was already moving, jogging down the corridor with the kind of easy, loping stride that covered ground faster than it looked like it should. We followed because, again, our survival instincts had apparently filed for retirement. Engineering sections sprawled across the lower decks, all pipes and conduits and machinery that kept the station from becoming a very cold tomb floating in space. We arrived just in time to see Riley tackle a raider who had been attempting to plant some kind of explosive device on the reactor shielding. She hit him like a missile. They both went down, rolling across the deck plating, but it was obvious who was winning. Riley ended up on top, one hand pinning his weapon arm, the other pressed against his throat, applying just enough pressure to be extremely motivating. Explosives, she said conversationally. Really? That seems excessive. What were you planning? Blow the reactor, kill everyone on board, collect ransom from grieving families? That is not even a good business model. The raider gurgled something that might have been agreement or might have been a plea for mercy. Thought so. Riley zip-tied his hands with a piece of conduit cable, then examined the explosive device. Crude, but effective. Timer set for 18 minutes. You people really committed to this whole terrible plan, did not you? She disarmed it with 3 quick movements that suggested either extensive demolition training or really excellent guesswork. The device powered down, threat neutralized, crisis averted by a teenage human who probably had homework due tomorrow. Station security finally arrived, Lieutenant Cross leading a full tactical team, weapons ready, faces set in determined grimaces. They swept into engineering, assessed the situation, and collectively deflated when they realized the danger had already been handled by one unarmed student. Cross stared at Riley, then at the tied-up raider, then at the disarmed explosive, then back at Riley. Miss Grant, we had protocols, we had procedures, we had an entire tactical response planned. Sorry, Riley said, not sounding sorry at all. They seemed impatient, did not want to wait for the proper paperwork. You engaged 30 armed hostiles, 14 directly. The others were more of a group negotiation situation. With your fists, and one desk, and a bench, and that pipe over there. She pointed. Very sturdy pipe. Good station construction. You should commend facilities maintenance. Cross made a sound somewhere between a laugh and a breakdown. I'm going to need you to file 17 different incident reports. Noted. Can I do it after classes resume? I still have that trade regulation exam tomorrow. The next hour blurred into organized chaos. Security rounded up the remaining raiders, who surrendered with remarkable enthusiasm once they learned what happened to their friends. Medical teams treated minor injuries, mostly to the raiders, because of course the human walked away without a scratch. Station administration activated emergency protocols, contacted coalition forces, and probably rewrote several sections of their crisis response manual. Through it all, Riley sat calmly in the security office, answering questions with the kind of patience that suggested she had done this before, which, knowing Deathworld humans, she probably had. I finally worked up the courage to approach her during a lull in the interrogations. That was incredible, terrifying, but incredible. She smiled, genuinely this time, without the predator edge. Thanks. Sorry you had to see all that. Not exactly how I wanted to spend Tuesday. How are you so calm? We were attacked. The station was breached. You fought off 30 raiders. 30. Riley shrugged. Perspective, I guess. Back home, this would barely register as a Tuesday. We have weather patterns more dangerous than those guys. Animals that make Skrell raiders look cuddly. Plants that will kill you just for walking too close. That is horrifying. It is home. She leaned back in her chair. Out here in the galaxy, everyone seems so shocked by what humans can do. But from our perspective, you are all the fragile ones. You live on paradise worlds with gentle gravity and safe atmospheres and predators you can actually outrun. We evolved in hell. Everywhere else is a vacation by comparison. Torp appeared in the doorway, holding 3 drinks from the commissary. Thought you might want something. They are doing that thing where they give out free refreshments after traumatic events. Very civilized. Thanks. Riley accepted a drink, sipped it thoughtfully. You know what the funny thing is? My parents sent me to this station because they thought it would be safer than Earth, quieter, less exciting. How is that working out? I asked. Well, I got through algebra without incident. So partial success? We all laughed, the kind of slightly hysterical laughter that comes after adrenaline wears off and reality sets in. Outside the office windows, coalition ships arrived, proper military vessels with actual firepower, ready to secure the station and transport the captured raiders to holding facilities. Lieutenant Cross returned, looking exhausted but relieved. "Miss Grant, I have been authorized to inform you that the Coalition is recommending you for a civilian valor commendation. Your actions today saved countless lives." "Not necessary," Riley said. "Honestly, I was just trying to finish class." "Nevertheless, you will also be receiving a formal apology from the Helix-9 administration for the inadequate security measures that allowed this incident to occur." "Also not necessary, but I will take that structural integrity report for the classroom furniture. Genuinely curious about the specifications now." Cross actually smiled. "I will see what I can do." Later, much later, after statements and reports and way too much bureaucratic process, they finally released us back to our dormitories. The station felt different now, quieter but somehow safer, like we had all passed through something significant together. I walked Riley back to her quarters, partly out of courtesy, partly because I still had questions burning in my thermal pouch. "Can I ask you something?" "Sure." "Why did you warn them? The raiders, I mean. You gave them a chance to leave." "Why?" Riley was quiet for a moment, considering. "Because violence should always be the last option, not the first. I can do a lot of damage, more than most species can really understand. But that does not mean I should. It does not mean I want to. Those raiders made a choice, a stupid, harmful choice, but I gave them the opportunity to make a different one. They did not take it. No, they did not. So I responded accordingly." She stopped outside her door. "Back on Earth we have this saying, 'Walk softly and carry a big stick.' Means you should be peaceful, diplomatic, kind when possible. But you should also be capable of overwhelming force when necessary. The stick is not for hitting people. It is for making sure they never forget you could. Is that why you stay so calm? So they underestimate you? Maybe. Or maybe I am just really good at pretending classroom furniture is not about to become a weapon." She grinned. "Get some rest, Vex. Tomorrow we still have that trade regulation exam. And unlike fighting raiders, I actually need to study for that." I laughed, waved goodbye, and headed back to my own quarters, mind still processing everything that happened. The next morning, classes resumed like nothing happened. Well, nothing except the missing classroom door, the completely destroyed desk, and the fact that everyone now gave Riley approximately 17 meters of respectful space in the corridors. She sat in her usual spot, hands folded, posture perfect, breathing slow and controlled. Professor Krill returned to his lecture about interspecies trade regulations, throat singing slightly shakier than usual, but determined to maintain normalcy. I watched Riley from 3 rows back, this strange, terrifying, wonderful creature from a planet that tried to kill everything on it, and thought about how lucky we were. Lucky she was on our side. Lucky she valued peace enough to give warnings. Lucky she was strong enough to protect us when those warnings went unheeded. The galaxy was full of dangerous things, raiders, pirates, hostile species, cosmic anomalies that could erase entire civilizations. But somewhere on Earth, on that horrifying Deathworld with its killer weather and nightmare fauna, evolution had created something more dangerous than all of them. It created humans, and thank everything sacred, they decided to be civilized about it. Mostly.